very soon the people of the United States of America are going to go to the polls and elect a new president. Now, I don't think I'm being particularly contentious when I say that the two candidates are really quite unpopular, aren't they? And things, I would suggest, have come to a pretty pass if out of all the hundreds of millions of people there are in the United States of America, you've managed to whittle it down to two people that almost nobody likes. But I am an optimistic sort, and I'd like to think that, possibly some good will come of this. If, for instance, Trump is elected, I think a lot of people are going to look at Trump and think, wow, this is interesting. When someone so manifestly, so flagrantly and spectacularly unsuited to the role of being president of, well, anything, gets elected, then maybe there's something wrong with our presidential election system. Maybe, if we only had two choices and almost no one liked either of them, maybe something's wrong. Don't you think that it's likely that something is wrong with the system if it's come to this? And maybe this will lead to the system being reformed, and that could be a good thing, couldn't it? Although it is, of course, extremely difficult to reform this sort of system in America because the Americans have a sort of religious regard for their constitution. Anything which meddles with that, it's like trying to change the wording of the Bible or something. You get an awful lot of people who have spent many hours scrutinizing it and drawing bizarre conclusions from what they've read. They will fight you tooth and claw to stop you from changing this constitution because they have this, as I say, sort of it's a sacred document almost to the Americans, which means that it's flipping difficult to make any improvements of it. And I suspect that there must be some improvements that can be made on it, given that you've ended up with this election. If you wanted to get away from kings and dynasties, for instance, and inheritance, and foster this idea that anyone in America can become president, and that's what you want people to think, isn't it? Then you've failed, haven't you? The system has quite definitely failed. You've got all these dynasties, the Kennedys, the Bushes, and now the Clintons. It seems that you're enormously more likely to become president if your brother or father or spouse was also president. So you've got much more of a dynastic system than just about anyone else. David Cameron and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, Margaret Thatcher, all the British Prime Ministers, they're not related to each other. They're not married to each other, sons or daughters of each other. They're just different people who end up getting to the top. We don't always get the best at the top, but, we don't have these dynasties that you seem to end up with in America. And you don't have to be spectacularly wealthy to become Prime Minister either. Whereas in America, you really do have to have a huge amount of money to spend. The amount of time and money that is spent on the American presidential elections is mind-melting. It seems that you get about 2 years of actually being president, another 2 years of running for election. Americans run for office. In Britain, we stand as a candidate for election. You stand for election. Although a lot of people in Britain have now started saying run for office, which is, don't. Come on, British people, speak your own language. We stand for election. It's much more dignified than running for office. Anyway, I'm going to talk about some television shows which I think cast some light onto this. The first of these is Yes, Minister, which was a British comedy show that was broadcast when I was a little boy. It was about 1980 to 1984, and then the main character in it, Jim Hacker, who was the Minister for Administrative Affairs, he became Prime Minister, and so they changed the name of the show to Yes, Prime Minister, and that went on till 1988. Now, Jim Hacker, played excellently by Paul Eddington, was the minister, or later Prime Minister, who's constantly trying to get things done and to make his mark, but he's all the time frustrated in his efforts because of Sir Humphrey Appleby. Now, Sir Humphrey Appleby is what we call in Britain a Whitehall Mandarin. He, in the original series, was the permanent secretary for the department. Now, ministers come and go. A new government gets elected in, someone becomes minister, then he makes a mistake, gets sacked, someone else comes in, and so forth. So you might have a new minister in a department every couple of years, whereas the permanent secretary is, as his name suggests. So he gets to know how things work. He gets to know who all the contacts he needs to get anything done, who they are, and which buttons to press to get them to do what he wants, and he can get things done. And it was a comedy show. It was a very nice and successful, very funny comedy show. But it had this underlying cynicism, this message, which was, people of Britain, the people you elected aren't actually running the show. They're not running the country. No, no, no. It's the unelected, civil servants at the top, these Whitehall mandarins that I'm talking about, the permanent secretaries of departments, they are actually running Britain. So it's shot through with this cynicism, and it was very funny. Some years later, Anando Iannucci, who's created loads of very good comedy series, he created something called In the Thick of It. There was a spin-off film called In the Loop you may have seen. So this is between 2005 and 2012 this is being produced. And it was in many ways the successor to Yes Minister. And in this, Peter Capaldi, yes, who, you know, the guy who later becomes a considerably less sweary Doctor Who, he plays Malcolm Tucker. Now, Malcolm Tucker is what we would call a spin doctor. And again, it's a comedy show with a plot each week, a little story that resolves. But again, it's shot through with this cynicism. It's shot through with this message, which is, people of Britain, the people you elected are not actually running the show. No, Britain is actually run by spin doctors, and they do this by bullying and blackmailing and intimidating the elected representatives, and that's how things are actually getting done or getting fouled up. So, what do the Americans produce at roughly the same time? Well, they came up with something called The West Wing. Now, I watched, I think, the first 3 series of The West Wing. I sort of quite liked it, but I wanted it to be better all the time. I kept thinking, this show could be, with just a little bit more cynicism, this could be a really good show. But instead, it was just bathed in this warm amber glow of, isn't everything so nice? Aren't these people all so nice? All the people running the country were shown as so selfless, so dedicated, and so nice and good. And I felt it just needed a shot of cynicism. I liked it when it was dealing with issues that were a bit grey, when you weren't entirely sure whether they were going to go this way or that way. But even whenever they did eventually come up with some decision, that usually the president, played by Martin Sheen, Josiah Bartlett, he would eventually make up his mind, and you were always left with the feeling that he had done the right thing. Of the 2 ways he could have gone, he went the right way, really. He took the moral choice. And it's too comfortable. I hated the way it was lit. The lighting was awful. It was totally unrealistic. And the music was so, America. America is great, and America is, it was so reassuring. It was sort of, it was reveling in the wonder of, the White House, the sort of this reverence for fame and so forth. I just, it needed some more comedy and more cynicism. Now, it is a comedy show, The West Wing. You may say, well, hang on, it's a drama. Well, yes, it's that as well. There are some definitely very dramatic bits, but it's shot through with comedy. All the dialogue is quite unbelievable dialogue. You can't say that it's meant to be fly on the wall or realistic or gritty, because everyone is a sparkling wit. No one ever says or Everyone has a witty comeback to whatever is said to them straight away. The dialogue's fantastic. Viewed as a comedy, it's sparkling, but it doesn't make you feel that anyone is saying this is how it actually is, this is the way the country is run, and that there's something wrong with it. Because what do we actually see? Well, we see one elected guy, the president, running the country, and he's got his chief of staff, Leo McGarry. So who is his chief of staff? He's the guy who runs things. And how did he get into power? Well, he's the president's friend, and that's all fine. That's fine. The president gets elected, and he says, well, my mate, Leo, I'll make him my chief of staff. And who else do we see actually making all the important decisions and making the difference between the country being run this way or that way? Well, we see their directors of communications and the deputy chief of staff. You see people like Sam Seaborn, the deputy of communications, Toby Ziegler, director of communications, and you see C.J. Craig, who is the press secretary. None of these people is elected, and yet they are running the country. You see them making all of the important decisions. And there's no cynicism. At no point does the West Wing say, people of America, this is not how to run a country. Your country should not be run by the speechwriters who write the president's speeches and who are motivated to make him look good and because they like a nice turn of phrase. That's no way to run a country, but there's no cynicism at all. C.J. Craig, who, by the way, I really liked as a character. And I liked the actress who played her. I enjoyed watching her until one episode in which she really horribly blackmails a general into keeping silent. And I thought, oh, wow. CJ, I thought you were a nice person, but now I realise that you're really not, if you could do that. And I went right off her, which is a great shame, because I really liked the character up until that point. But all these people who work for the president, these what we would call spin doctors. By the way, Alistair Campbell was in real life the Downing Street press secretary. Yeah, press secretary. That was his job name. But everyone called him a spin doctor. He was running the show in Tony Blair's time, and many people believe that the Malcolm Tucker character from In the Loop and In the Thick of It was based on him. It's been denied, but a lot of people think, yeah, that's him, isn't it? Anyway, there is no cynicism in the show. So all these unelected people making all the important decisions, they're shown as so nice, so achingly nice and dedicated and selfless and hardworking and so forth. I just think, come on, what you've got to do is you've got to question things a bit more. So it would be nice if you could, stick on American television, perhaps a series that, that actually has this questioning, should the country actually be run this way, sort of message shot through it, as a degree of cynicism, something like The West Wing, but with healthy, perhaps British-like cynicism shot through it. Now, the House of Cards doesn't count because, well, one, it's not quite the show that it's more of a drama, isn't it, with a building plot. But it's not saying this is the way that the country is actually run. It's more of a, wouldn't it be scary if someone this ruthless took this path to power? And it's rather fantastical. It involves murders and so forth. You don't feel when watching that, oh no, they're trying to say this is the way it actually is happening. No, it's more of a scare story. And another thing, that one's based on a British television series as well, which was called House of Cards. And later series was called To Play the King. So that doesn't count. So what we need is a West Wing with some cynicism shot through it, and we need a debate going about, president elections. Is this really a great system? If you can come up with two candidates that almost no one likes, then the system has failed. Anyway, as always, don't run with scissors.